Well, good morning. It is 10:01 a.m. on Saturday, September 21st, 2019. I'm Christiana Ellis and I just got up. This is 5 more minutes. So, ordinarily, on Sundays, I do a rewatch of a cartoon show, and I am currently doing Cowboy Bebop. But because starting today, I'm going on vacation to Acadia National Park in Maine. Just later today, I'll be driving up there. And I figured for a longer video, like the rewatches, it might be more convenient to do that one today so that tomorrow can be focused on tomorrow we can be focused on having the vacation update. So Pixelate's already. Boy, I wish I could have some sort of a understanding of what was causing that. I really have no idea. I've definitely switched over to doing a double recording, so at least the YouTube version won't have those, but I wish I knew what was causing that. I can't figure it out. Nothing I've been able to find so far in my Google searches have led me to any clues. Anyway, what are you going to do? The show must go on. But in any event, as I was just saying, the plan is that I'm going to do my rewatch today instead of tomorrow. So, today I'm going to talk about Cowboy Bebop, Session 2, Episode 2, Stray Dog Strut. Now, this is an exciting episode because it introduces Ein, the Corgi. Hooray! So, in the broader story structure of the show, as I mentioned last time, we began the show with only 2 of what would eventually become a crew of 5 for the Bebop. And we're going to we're going to bring everyone together one at a time. So for last time we got to meet Jet and Spike. We were given some hints at a mysterious backstory, past or future, for Spike. But we don't really know much about Jet yet before what before who he is now on the Bebop. And we'll get more about Jet's backstory later, but we have to start assembling the rest of the gang, right? And so we start with Ein, who I think if you only watched this episode, you wouldn't necessarily guess that Ein becomes essentially a full member of the crew from this episode, but certainly this is where Ein shows up and is brought to the ship. But that happens at the end of the episode. So let's talk about the beginning of the episode. So we begin with a really big, tall, skinny, lanky guy unwrapping bandages around his face in a gross-looking bathroom. In the meantime, you see a bunch of scientists, and we know they're scientists because they're wearing glasses and lab coats, but they come at him with guns, and they're basically demanding that he surrender this large briefcase that he's got. And he easily takes them all out. We see him do like a hand thing, which suggests martial arts of some kind, but he just takes them out easily and makes his way, out into the city. And it's interesting because we hear them call him Abdul Hakim. And just as a bit of a pop culture reference that isn't really important to know for the show, but is interesting, is that this character is made to look somewhat like a famous basketball player and sometimes actor named Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. So Abdul Hakim, as the name, seems like it evokes that, as like the resemblance is enough that plus the name seems like it's certainly intentional. And essentially, since there's also a Bruce Lee reference in this episode, and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar played the bad guy in a 1972 Bruce Lee movie called Game of Death. So, interesting. So just the where all of the various little pop culture references get to, and how sometimes as time goes by with an older show like this, the obscure little pop culture references could easily get sort of lost. No one would recognize it anymore and just think, oh, look at this weird guy. But in any event, we see in hyperspace on the Bebop, Spike is watching. This is also the first appearance of Big Shot, which is the ridiculous bounty hunter TV show that will be a running gag throughout the show, where you have these two, cowboys, a man and a woman in ridiculous outfits, talking about who are the latest bounties out there, and it's all very silly. And I love Big Shot. It's so it's so silly. But in any event, we learn that there is a bounty hunter named Abdul Hakim who has stolen an innocent lab animal and is worth 8 million wulongs. And so, just in terms of balancing how much is a wulong, right? We do recall that the bounty from last week was 2.5 million wulongs, and Spike called that small fry. But of course, they didn't get that money. They still need money, and so 8 seems like, yeah, okay, he's into that. But so one of the things that's interesting right away, though, is we see that the face they show for this guy is not at all the same as the guy we just saw. But of course, we saw him pulling bandages off of his face, and that idea that he might have changed his face is confirmed when a doctor friend of Spike's calls him and asks for money in order to give him a picture of Abdul Hakim's new face. And looks like he is personally motivated too, because I guess Abdul Hakim was not very grateful for the plastic surgery and punched the doctor on his way out. And certainly what we've met of this guy so far, he seems like he's kind of a unpleasant character. Yeah. So in the meantime, we see Abdul Hakim with his big briefcase. And I will just go ahead and say that there's some slight scaling issues in this episode that seem a little weird in terms of, like, how big is this briefcase and how big is Ein, and could Ein actually fit in the briefcase as it's shown when it's closed? And also just like how big is Ein seems to vary a little bit depending on what they're doing with him. Also, to be fair, it's a little bit weird because Abdul Hakim is a very big guy, so some of the shots, like where he's grabbing Ein by the scruff and just picking him up, it's like, well, okay, what's the proportional size between these two? It's a little weird, but not a big deal. I think I wouldn't have noticed it at all, except for my having had my own corgi. Then I know how big they are. So I would just go ahead and say that even when it seems like to be a stabilized size, Ein is relatively small for a corgi. It's fine. But that's all right. In any event, we see him going to a juice bar. He's waiting to meet his contact. We don't really know what's in the briefcase yet, but we see him get conned by a team of partners. You have an old man that jostles him and is meant to be distracting him while the other guy steals his briefcase, but the old guy gets a little more than he bargained for, because we see that for the serious crime of bumping into him at a juice bar and making him spill his juice a little bit, Abdul Hakim thinks it is appropriate to grab this guy by the face, put a cockroach in the juice, and then force the guy drink it. And it's very, like, visceral. Like, when this guy's hands are all over him, it's like, ugh. It's like, ugh. Yeah, we're definitely made to not like this guy. This is a bad, bad man. But in any event, this pair gets the better of him, because while he's distracted by his cruelty of the old man, the young partner steals the briefcase and gets away with it. And so it manages to escape. And so now this is where we have the Bebop arriving on Mars. And so it's interesting that we get to see a specific crater that's got environmental controls over it to make it sort of lush and with water and everything, whereas most of Mars looks like we would normally kind of expect. We get to see the Bebop do a water landing, which is interesting, right? That it's kind of like a seaplane version of a spaceship. But so Spike is excited because he feels like he's got the inside track. Suspicious briefcase, knows what he looks like, whereas most of the other bounty hunters out there would still be looking for the old face, right? But he knows that he is, he's trying to pick up some clues on a trail, and he knows that his quarry would be trying to unload a lab animal. So he's like, where would you even sell an illegal lab animal? So, but he starts with a weapon shop, and he's, basically saying, where would you sell a legal lab animal? And it's interesting that the guy initially wants money, but Spike basically impresses him with his knowledge of the nunchucks, and this is where we get the Bruce Lee reference. He says it's the way of the dragon model, apparently with a longer chain than standard, I guess. And so after the guy is, impressed, and this is where, we get some more of Spike's kind of charm, right? Like his two main sort of the tools in his toolkit, so to speak, are that he's got this glib sort of charm to him, but also, like his extraordinary hand-to-hand prowess. Sometimes he uses a gun too, but mostly it's, like that's more ordinary. In any event, he's told, hey, this is this shop that maybe would be the place to go. So in the meantime, by coincidence, that is actually where the younger partner is taking the briefcase, because we see him just peek into it and hear like a dog growling, but we don't see the inside at that point. So if we had no idea about the episode, we might think, oh, some kind of weird monster in there, a lab animal, huh? But he takes it to this little pet store animal shop, which is delightful. I love the pet store lady who's wearing a turtle on her head, and initially it looks like it's just like a turtle shell hat, except that later the turtle pokes his little head out, and it's like, and I just, oh, my baby, she's so, everything's so dramatic, and I love that. I love that animal store lady. I don't think she ever has a name or anything, but the store is called Animal Treasure. And so turns out that as this guy is going to try to sell the animal there, Spike, who's gotten apparently a good tip, sees, oh, here's a guy trying to unload a suspicious briefcase at an animal store, so that's probably him. Maybe he's changed his face again, but unfortunately for Spike, we know that that's actually not the case. But in the meantime, while he's got his gun out, they open the briefcase, and it's Ein. It's a corgi. I don't get the name until next time, maybe? I'm not sure. I don't think they actually said the name in this one, but it is Ein, because I know I've seen the show before. But it's a Welsh corgi, and he's very, very cute. And but the pet shop lady is affectionate, but also just very practical in saying, but not worth anything. You see them everywhere, she says. You could probably get about 2, and they're like 200 woolongs, and she says, no, 2 woolongs. And so given that we're talking about a bounty of 8 million, it's like, well, okay, certainly seems weird. But then, of course, we also have reason to believe this is a fancy corgi in some way, lab animal. So there's, but she's just mistaking him for an ordinary corgi. But at this point we get, let's see. Yeah. So this is where Spike is saying, okay, this is obviously a misunderstanding. Like, this is not, this guy is not who I'm looking for. This can't be right. So he goes to leave, but that's just when we get all of these different little threads come together. Abdul Hakim shows up, and he draws his gun on the guy. And then, let's see, do we have the scientist show up? Yeah, so I can't remember the exact sequence, but we have Abdul Hakim show up, threaten this kid, to try to, take back the dog. There's a shot that goes off. Ein runs away along with all of the other animals, and the woman's like, "Oh, my babies!" And it's very silly. And then the scientists show up in their ridiculous science vessel van. They're looking for the dog too, and now there's a chase that's on, and so now we get just a fun sequence where people are just running through the city, and Ein, who's low to the ground, is running right under obstacles that everyone else has to jump over or go through, and that's kind of fun. And there's just some nice music where we get a fun chase sequence, and it's a good, just like a 4-part chase sequence, right? Because we've got Ein, Hakim, Spike, and the scientists, and it's very silly. And here's where we get pretty soon here our first indication of what's going on with Ein, although it's subtle. If you recognize it once you know the real answer, right? Which is that Ein is actually very, very smart. But what we see is Ein has ended up cornered on a bridge between Spike and Abdul Hakim. And there's sort of a standoff, and neither of them are actually particularly paying attention to the dog. They're looking at each other because Spike is basically pointing out, "I don't care about the dog. You're my bounty, so I'm here for you." And so they're facing each other down, and we see a ship start to pass under the bridge. And we watch as Ein the corgi waits carefully until the ship is going under the bridge, and then jumps over the side to jump onto the boat. And then we get a fun sequence where both Abdul Hakim and Spike go to jump after him. But having landed safely on the boat, Ein jumps back off the boat to meet up with Spike in midair, forcing him to land in the water with Ein while Abdul Hakim is on the boat and sails and goes further away. So, like, basically choosing to go with Spike and sort of sideline Abdul Hakim for a little while. And so that's interesting, right? Like, tactically, like you could sort of say, is that a coincidence? Could be. Like, if we weren't sure, we could say, did the dog do that on purpose? Because it seemed to work out pretty well in the terms of now he's with Spike. And we get a fun little sequence of what looks like little corgi in very shallow water kind of barking, and then we get the nice cartoon reveal that he's actually sitting on top of Spike's head, who is underwater. And that's all very silly. And Ein continues to be incredibly adorable and cute throughout the episode. But so we have, back on the Bebop, Spike has brought Ein back there. They gave him a collar, and the collar has a tracking device, which is crucial to their whole plan. Spike's mad that he is, this is a running theme throughout the episode and really the series, where Spike is angry and complaining that the dog isn't worth much, and then says, "Dumb dog," and he gets a gentle nip on the finger, which again is it's one of those things where it's like, it could just be an animal thing, but like, he just said a mean thing about the dog while pointing his finger, and without like growling or doing a big aggressive bite, Ein just kind of nips him right on the tip of his finger because it was right in his face. And it was just like, because now that we, once you know the secret, which is that Ein is very smart and understands everything that's happening, it's kind of fun to just watch him react that way, because Ein is a fascinating character in that he is very smart, but he is also a dog. He's not a human in a dog's body. He's a dog. He's just very smart and able to figure things out, but he doesn't have, like, he can understand people, but he doesn't have a language of his own, and he has dog priorities. He's just excellent at using problem-solving skills to achieve his dog-based goals. It's very fun. Anyway, the plan is Spike gets to be glorified bounty hunter and dog walker. And he's just going to walk around the city hoping that Hakim finds them so they can catch him again. But knowing that now they've got a tracker on the dog. So if Hakim manages to get the dog away, they can track him. In the meantime, we get lots of fun little interstitials with the scientists, and there's a fun running gag where one of the scientists who's driving is just got these endless rants about what are we gonna do? We're gonna find this guy, and we're gonna get Hakeem. We're gonna get that dog back, and if we don't, our butts are in hot water. And then the other guy's just like, seems that way, and it just the guy doesn't say anything except seems that way, and it's just a silly running gag. There's nothing really important behind it. But it's funny. So, but we continue to have this multi-part, this web of different parties involved. Because the scientists want to get the dog back. Hakeem is. Well, also, the scientists basically are implying not only do they need the dog back just because they want to have the dog, but also the implication of, like, if people find out what we did to that dog, like, it's not clear what they did. Ein doesn't seem traumatized or anything, but he's, maybe publicly wouldn't like the idea of a super smart dog. But in any event, they decide that they're going to use this high-powered dog whistle to attract every dog in the city to them. And it seems to be effective because, Ein runs away from Spike to follow it. And in the meantime, Hakeem contacts his buyer again. But oh no, this is where the guy basically refuses to postpone the meeting, which just means that Hakeem is like in a desperate time crunch now because, to get the dog back. And so we get another chase again, with the scientists trying to catch Ein in a net now that they've got a whole crowd of dogs following them. And we see an interesting bit where Ein is running right after the van, but then specifically ducks away right when they fire this net, so it gets all of the other dogs, but not Ein. Again, it's like we're seeing evidence of he's aware, he's paying attention, he's smart. And then but Hakeem steals a newlywed couple's car. It's all very farce. Manages to grab Ein and spray him with a little sleeping gas. Oh no! So now he's got Ein back, and thankfully we got the tracker on Ein. So Spike, having gotten briefly knocked over, run off the road by Hakeem, gets his ship. They're chasing after Hakeem on the road, and it's at this point it's like a hostage situation, right? Because Spike can follow Hakeem, knows where he is, can easily catch up in his ship, but how do you stop him without killing him? And and Ein, right? Especially because it was emphasized at the beginning, you need to bring him in alive. You can't kill him because then you don't get the bounty. You only get the bounty if you bring him in alive. And so it's, that's where this dangerous situation. It's a little bit of a standoff where they're flying over this bridge. But then we see Ein wake up, take advantage of Hakeem being kind of distracted, and we see him literally jump up onto the steering wheel and consciously poke a sequence of buttons with his paw that causes the doors to open, and then he goes to jump out of the car and try to go over the bridge, and he doesn't quite make it. He kind of clips the railing, and he's clearly hurt, and it's this like, and he's going over the bridge. And here's where we have something that the episode doesn't make a big deal about it, but Spike very consciously decides to go after and save the dog instead of capture his guy. And even though he protests, it's like, it's like Jet says later, you're the one that brought the dog back here. Why are you complaining so much? And, and this is where Spike saves the dog instead of catching his bounty, because that's who Spike is, despite all of his big words. Now, I will say that the animation is a little bit, I just mean in the idea of catching the dog on the windshield of his spaceship as they're moving very fast and flying. Like it looks a little bit like in if these were real creatures and not cartoons. That doesn't look like it would have been an okay landing for the dog, but we see Ein, he's fine. So we have to just sort of accept the visual storytelling we're given, which is the dog is fine, he's fine, it's not a problem. But I just mean you look at the shot where he actually catches him, and it's not like Superman catching Lois Lane where you can see it looks gentle. It looks like, ooh. But in any case, it's fine. So perhaps I'm oversensitive as a Corgi fan. But in any event, because Spike decides to save the dog instead of save Ein instead of going after his bounty, the scientists are the ones that are able to catch up with Hakim, but they all spin out, go over the side of this overpass, and end up crashing into the front of a police station. Wah, wah. And so back on the ship, we have Spike and Jet, commiserating. And because they are squabbling with each other, they missed the explanation on Big Shot where they're saying, oh, well, no one gets the bounty because it looks like Hakim found a pretty impressive way to turn himself in. And so nobody gets the bounty. And then they explain on Big Shots that Ein is apparently a data dog, which they imply that he's very smart without really giving any additional detail as to what that means. But I'm with the Big Shot lady. That I always forget those two characters' names because they use them occasionally, but I can never. It's like, it's Punch and Judy, I think. Yeah. I think they are. That is who they're called. Yeah, it's Punch and Judy are the two characters on Big Shot. I forgot. I can't believe I forgot that. So in any way, I'm with Judy when she's like, "Gee, I'd like to have a dog like that." Yeah, very smart corgi. It seems great, and it's going to be a great member of the Bebop crew. Welcome Ein aboard the Bebop. And so in the meantime, no bounty money, but despite Spike's protestations to the contrary, the crew of the Bebop has a new dog. And so that's the extent of this particular story, this particular episode, I mean. And we'll be back next week for Session 3, Honky Tonk Woman, and we'll meet Faye Valentine, who... I just have to say, rewatching, I'm seeing a lot of influences on me from this show because, in particular, seeing Ein is what inspired me to get a corgi. And then, as we meet Faye Valentine, if you have not watched this show, but you have listened to my audio drama, Space Casey, we'll talk about Faye Valentine next week. So, in the meantime, I'll talk to you tomorrow for 5 more minutes.